Welcome back. You're watching the Urban Debate on Mirror. Now, I'm Faye. Thank you for joining us. It has been a morning or a day of high action here in India. For the first time in the history of our country, an impeachment motion has been moved against the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India. Through the day, we had responses come in from members of the legal fraternity and from members of the political fraternity. The verdict is split down the middle. There are some who believe that members of the opposition are using this impeachment motion purely as a political tool to get back at the judiciary for a handful of unfavorable verdicts. They're upset. We even had on our show former AG Mukul Rohatgi call them petulant children. Soli Sorabji, former AG himself, said this sounds like they don't have a case for an impeachment. On the other hand, another set of views also had Prashant Bhushan speak to us through the course of the day, where he turned around and he said that there was no other choice. This had been building for a while. What does an impeachment actually mean? And will this leave a stain on our Supreme Court that will perhaps be difficult to remove? That's the question we're asking this evening. And I want to just put this forward for the benefit of our audience. We don't want a loud panel of 12 people screaming over each other. So we've actually handpicked only 3 intelligent voices that we can understand and that will help us understand what is really going on. Mr. Arima Sundaram is a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, a very eminent voice. Kamini Jaiswal, senior advocate with the Supreme Court, and Mr. KTS Tulsi, member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha and senior advocate with the Supreme Court. I thank all 3 of you for being kind enough to give us your time this evening. I'm going to start with Mr. Tulsi. Mr. Tulsi, if you could just explain to our audience where you stand on this matter, both as a member of the Rajya Sabha, where the motion has been moved, and as a member of the legal fraternity, as an officer of the court. Do you believe there is a case here for impeachment?
Well, you know, I have been very uncomfortable for a couple of months, ever since I read the transcript of a conversation which was recorded by the CBI by way of interception of the talks between the former judge of Odisha and some of the officials or interlocutors of Prasad Education Trust, where they are talking about the payments made or to be made to the person who's heard those cases, and
yes,
there is a grievance that what was promised was not done, and they say that, well, this will be done now, and whatever was done was also in accordance with the agreement, etc. Now, the sense that I got was that this was not somebody who's talking, bragging about and maybe using the name of a judge, because judges are so vulnerable. You decide any case one way or the other person can make silly allegations. But here was an intercept by the official agency. Right. There was no doubt about its authenticity.
Forgive me, Mr.
The nature
Tulsi.
of conversation was that...
yes. You know, I understand the Medical Council case of India, for our viewers who don't know, if you give me a minute, is a case where there were movements about the fact, the allegation was that you could pay to get your way within the judiciary. It was a very, very serious case that Mr. Tulsi is referring to. But Mr. Tulsi, what bearing does that have really on this? I mean, while that case was serious in fact, why do you believe that it leads to grounds for impeachment of the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court?
You see, according to the Constitution, my understanding is this will amount to misbehavior. If this allegation is true, it constitutes misbehavior. And this is the first charge in the motion of impeachment. And I think this is the most serious. It all depends when the inquiry is conducted, evidence is led, witnesses are produced, they are cross-examined, documents are examined, and the committee that is constituted for the purpose of inquiry does a thorough job.
Right. Okay. So let me bring in then
whatever is the truth. I'm sure
it will come out. All right. So for our viewers,
whatever is the truth will emerge.
Yes.
That is the hope.
So for our viewers, this is what happens. The impeachment motion is now placed before the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, the Vice President of India, who will seek legal counsel and decide whether or not he wants to accept it, after which a committee will be formed. The committee will look into the charges and then they will submit their report, after which there will be a vote in both houses of parliament where you have to have a majority 2/3 for this to pass. Mr. Arimasundaram, would you like to respond to what Mr. Tulsi was saying, that there were reasons to be distressed and this was in fact a valid step to take?
You know, I don't want to get into a debate on the charges because right now they're allegations, but I think Mr. Tulsi will be fair enough to state, I don't want to really get into a debate on it, but Mr. Tulsi,
Yes.
just to point out, you've got to be fair enough to state two things. One, there was no mention of the name of the Chief Justice, if that's what you're implying. Secondly, I think the outcome of the case, you all know, all these colleges lost the case. They didn't get what they wanted. But
Yes.
that's going by the way. That's on the merits of the case and the judgment. I'm not interested in all that. What I am very, very concerned is the fact that is this the fall guy? Is the judiciary the fall institution for basically what is nothing more than a political power game of one party trying to hit at another party, finding every excuse in the book they could, and now using this as one more political attack? If that is the case, then what I really fear, as a Democrat who so strongly believes in the separation of powers and independence of the judiciary, that you're really creating a situation where politicians can use the judiciary as a tool to work out their personal fights against each other. I have to ask myself, is the judiciary in this case not a case of collateral damage, something which is happening because one party is trying to dethrone another party, and here's an opportunity to hit out? Why? Because a few judgments have come from this court which seems to be in favor of the government stand. One also forgets that judgments came from the same Supreme Court which actually went totally against the government in the case of right of privacy. So when you look at the whole thing, it really gets one concerned as to whether the attack is really on the judiciary directly or on the person concerned directly, or whether it's just the judiciary has just become a useful tool, an opportunity for one political party to use against another. And if that becomes the case, it gets very worrying, because 50 people of the Rajya Sabha, 100 members of the Lok Sabha can actually bring around, for a political reason, let us say, a motion which will affect every Indian's faith in the judiciary. And let's not forget that even if the average Indian loses faith in every other institution, he has maintained the faith in the judiciary, and the judiciary has always lived up to the aspirations and hope of every individual. And I am so worried that that is what is being eroded in this political prize fight. And that is something, is what I see as a citizen, is behind this entire impeachment motion. On the merits of it, I can say so many things I don't want to, but all I do want to comment is that, in my opinion, this has become a fallout in a political battle.
Well, I want to bring in Kamini Jaiswal as well, a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, who was part of the case that's been mentioned, the Medical Council of India case. Ms. Jaiswal, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. You know, if we look at the process here of impeachment, and for our viewers who are still writing to me saying, what does this actually mean? Impeachment is the process by which a sitting judge can be removed from his position. Although it has never actually fully been carried out in this country.
Don't forget, I mean...
Yes, it's never actually ever come up against the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Ms. Jaiswal, please, go ahead.
That doesn't, when we always talk of Chief Justice as one amongst equals, he is also one amongst equals here. Okay. All that he is a master of the roster. He has some administrative powers which others don't have. So let's not make such a big hoo-ha about it. Okay? Now, the question is, why are we making this such a political issue? Impeachment motion is the only method by which judges of the High Court or Supreme Court can be removed. It is, they have to be judged by their own peers. The committee that is to be set up is a judge of the Supreme Court, a Chief Justice of the High Court, and a jurist. It is a very high-powered committee. It goes into every aspect of the allegation. There is a proper trial with evidence, cross-examination, examination, arguments. The whole process is followed. Now, everybody is making it out to be that this impeachment motion has been filed and the Supreme Court is demolished. And this whole thing is done because some judgments have, I don't understand what judgment they are talking of. This impeachment motion was not a follow-up of any judgment. Maybe they are aware of certain judgments that are forthcoming. Maybe they are aware of certain judgments that are coming in the favor of the government, and therefore they are saying this is all a part of a fallback because of judgment. The only judgment that has come was the judgment that came yesterday. Now this impeachment motion has been there for a month at least. 1 week back, an appointment was sought with the Vice President. The Vice President happened to give an appointment today. Maybe they got to know that the appointment is today, so the judgment came yesterday. Now, you can, attribute motives to everybody. Everybody is a human being. Everybody can be attributed motives. Now, if there are 4 judges of the Supreme Court have said that the democracy is in danger. Now, because of the functioning of a judge or because of the functioning of an institution, the democracy is in danger, what further reason do you need for impeachment? This was said in February. From February, we are now in April. Nothing has been done to undo what was all the complaints or to, look at the complaints that were there and to kind of, find a solution amongst themselves. No, they haven't.
All right.
So we are talking of a 4th pillar of democracy.
May I respond
we want to strengthen that 4th pillar of democracy, which is already
Arima
being
Sundaram
demolished.
wants to respond to you. Arima Sundaram wants to respond to you. Mr. Sundaram, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes, what I do want to respond to is, what I find very unfortunate is dragging these 4 senior, very respected judges into what has today become an impeachment motion. Let's understand something very clearly. These are 4 senior judges who are held in the highest regard and respect in the Supreme Court. They came out and very boldly, honestly stated, look here, there are administrative problems in the Supreme Court. If we don't attend to it, democracy is at stake. Why? Because the Supreme Court, the judiciary is a pillar of democracy, and we have to clean our house and see that our administration is perfect. According to me, this is a court which speaks of transparency in every wing of government and insists on it. So the transparency was shown in the judiciary itself to say, look here, there have been stories that administration has not been very good. We want to make it very clear, yes, there are problems in the administration. These have to be attended to. These have to be looked at. Otherwise, democracy is at stake. Now, let me just finish, please. And this is a very bold thing for them to have done. Now, that is a matter which thereafter becomes something for the judiciary to look into, for the administration to look into, to see how to tighten it up. And from what I understand, attempts are on that way. That cannot be a ground for impeachment, and what I am worried about is that this impeachment motion seems to jump on the back of these 4 judges and say, look, this is a ground for impeachment. Those 4 judges never said, remove the Chief Justice, impeach the Chief Justice, this Chief Justice must go. And yet today I keep hearing the story again and again as though everything is being put on the shoulders of 4 judges who really said, let's tighten up the administration, and who voiced their concerns in public very boldly. Right. And today they're almost being made the scapegoats for an impeachment motion. And I find great fault on that.
I'm sorry, that's not the case.
Yes, before I go back to Kamaliji, I just want to point out that in that press conference, the 4 judges said, and I'm quoting, that administration of the Supreme Court is not in order. Many things are less desirable than that have happened in the last few months. They went on to say that they have failed to persuade the Chief Justice of India that certain things are not in order and therefore you must take remedial measures. We have spotted things in the last few months. We've tried to intervene to no avail. For 20 years from now, the nation should not say we sold our souls. We've tried collectively to tell the Chief Justice Deepak Mishra certain things in administration is not in order. Ms. Jaiswal, go ahead.
That was a clarion call to say, let's get our house in order and let's go forward. It wasn't saying remove the Chief Justice.
All right. Ms. Jaiswal, please go ahead.
Happens if the house is not put in order and if one of the charges also relates to the issue of allocation of cases being allocated where he is one of the parties or has something and he's still looking at those cases and passing judgment. All that was a part of it. One allocation of case was one of the reasons those judges gave. Nobody is wanting to ride on the shoulder of the judges. We are, in fact, these are the very seniors who actually, said that they should never have done it, that judges should never have come out and said it. But we believe that in a democracy, if they tried to set their house in order internally, if it could not be set right internally, it's a very serious issue that 4 judges have to come out and air their grievances in public. If 4 judges have come out and aired their grievances in public, if nobody else, at least one must take note of it. And if the judge in the Chief Justice has still not done anything, where does one go? One of the grounds in the impeachment is the way he is allocating cases. So it's nobody is wanting to ride on their shoulder. Nobody is wanting to, piggy bank on them or make them scapegoats. That's a very, very false accusation.
Well, I also want to bring in Mr. Tulsi here. Mr. Tulsi, a couple of questions for you. There have been reports of the fact that the Congress party internally doesn't all agree. Mr. Chidambaram has not made a comment. There are reports that Dr. Manmohan Singh is not on board with this, and perhaps Salman Khurshid isn't either. That's the first question. The second question is, since finally the final vote will need a majority in both houses of parliament, and it's unlikely to get that majority vote because Parliament right now has a BJP majority, is this going to be all for naught?
This is political.
Okay, with regard to the first question, the answer is that I am not a part of the Congress party and I don't get to know what developments are taking place except whatever is reported in the newspapers. And all that I can say is that Dr. Manmohan Singh, we are told, was not approached because he has been the Prime Minister and it would not be correct.
Okay.
And we are told that Mr. Chidambaram was not asked to sign because there are certain problems that are going on with regard to his son and it may personally embarrass him. And so far as Mr. Salman Khurshid is concerned, he is not a member of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. And therefore, perhaps, I don't know, I had no interaction because I'm a loner, I'm just one person independent.
Yes.
And with regard to the second question, I think that majority, you see, one thing is certain, that after this transcript, comes the question where the Chief Justice chooses to deal with the same matter in administrative capacity and then in judicial capacity, which I think is very wrong. Now, this is so stark that we at least think that all the parliamentarians, firstly, the committee will go into this matter, and then all the parliamentarians are very seasoned, rational persons. And this is something which is going to affect people's conscience. And this voting shouldn't take place, and I don't know whether it will take place, but normally no whip should be issued for this thing. We don't have many conventions because none of these has ever succeeded, not taken to logical conclusion. But one is hoping that people will see that everyone will see that what happened is wrong. And it's a question of protecting judiciary's independence.
Right. So you're
It's not a
rejecting, Mr.
question
Tulsi,
of weakening it.
yes.
The whole purpose is to strengthen it.
You're rejecting this entire accusation that the whole thing is political and it is just a political tool.
So it's a political process.
It's a political process. All right. Mr. Sundaram, do you want to
The
respond?
Constitution gives this.
Yes, I'd like to add something.
Yes, please.
Impeachment is a political process, there is no doubt. It's a quasi-judicial process also. But while it may be a political process,
Yes.
I object to the politicizing of the process. And what is being done is the process is being politicized and
We
being
are not
used
doing
as a
it.
political tool. That doesn't make it a political process.
Who's
It makes it a
politicizing it?
politicized process. And I object to that. Well, today, if you ever saw the press conference, you have moved an impeachment motion.
If it's
you go
political,
there,
it's going to get
you stand in
politicized.
front of the TV, you call all the national media, and then you go on before the national media, literally arguing a brief as to why this impeachment should go on, and you go on without thinking what is going to happen, what is the collateral damage to the judiciary, the confidence of the people in the judiciary. Now, a legislator has equal power as a member of the judiciary has, as the executive has, to uphold every pillar of democracy. Now, people have great faith in the judiciary. They believe in the judiciary. The common man has great faith in the judiciary. You erode that faith. You move an impeachment motion and say, we moved an impeachment motion. You don't come before TV cameras and then give a long speech, a half-hour, 45-minute press conference, detailing the charges, supporting the charges, literally arguing a brief in court, when the judge himself or anybody else can't come there and defend it. Now, I think that was politicizing. And if you call it anything else, I'm very sorry.
Ms. Jaiswal?
No. People have a right to know.
Why does
In
he not talk
democracy,
about the way the
people are the
BJP
judges.
has politicized it?
People are the judges
Who's
of judges.
politicized it? They are saying because it was a revenge petition, because the judgment came yesterday, so therefore today it was a revenge petition. Then they talk of it. Why do they forget that 3 judges?
Madam, the
or
first
3
one who went and did
eminent
anything
people will
were those
sit
members
and
who went
go
straight
through
from
the evidence.
presenting the petition
First
to
or
going and giving
second,
a
yeah.
speech.
No, but you know, I also want to point this out. So there's been some argument that this is in reaction to the Judge Loya case that was you know, heard yesterday, where we had a judgment yesterday, dismissed
it is
yesterday.
strange, it
But
didn't
could
happen overnight, yeah.
but could 71 signatures have been put together overnight in you know, of members of Parliament? Is that
Overnight,
possible?
yeah. What nonsense is this?
Mr. Sundaram, could this impeachment motion have been put together overnight?
Whoever is making that.
Sorry?
Could the impeachment motion have been put together
Faye,
overnight?
I'm not commenting on whether this, Faye, can I answer? I'm not commenting on whether this is a fallout of the Loya case and because of that this impeachment motion was moved. Maybe it was signed many days ago. Maybe it took this much time to move it. Maybe they decided to move it because of the Loya case. I'm not going there at all. I'm on a simple
And
issue.
signatures have dates.
Is this impeachment part of a political game? Is it being politicized? Has it been politicized before the fact, during the fact, after the fact? All the arguments which went forward during the Loya case became more and more political in their hue, became so political in their hue for any bystander like me, who's totally bipartisan, who has no party affiliation. It sounded to me like a political sermon. Now, if that was so, looking at the whole thing, my fear, and I'll say it as a fear, because none of us has the omniscience to know what exactly is true and not true. But my fear is, are we in this political game hitting at the very pillar of democracy, which is the judiciary, and affecting the integrity of the judiciary and the people's faith in the judiciary? And that is my fear.
Remaining silent would be hitting the judiciary. There is a duty cast on the Parliament and the people of India. And that duty is to safeguard the independence of judiciary. And if these 2 instances or 4 instances are inconsistent
Right.
with with the expectations from the Chief Justice, it is the duty of Parliament to take constitutional action. And this is what is provided under the Constitution. And that is why all this had to be brought to the notice of the public, because otherwise they would have said that this is irresponsible. This had to be brought to the notice of the people, that we are acting with a heavy heart. We are very sad that this had to be done, and that is why we continue to wait that the matters may get resolved between the judges. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But when it did not get resolved, and the letters of Justice Chalmeshwar also perhaps indicated that, then there had to be the discharge of the obligation which is placed by the Constitution on the Parliament.
Well, Mr. Tulsi, respond to this. The fact that people want to know, and I'm responding to questions that are popping up on my computer from my viewers, and these are citizens who are asking at this point. If you're telling us that we need finally a majority in Parliament to pass this through, we know also that the Honorable Justice Deepak Mishra is likely to retire, or will retire in fact in a few months. Then was this really necessary? We also have Soli Sarabji, who's turned around today on our channel and told us that that he finds no grounds for impeachment in the 5 charges that have been made. What is your response to this? That was it really necessary? Was this in fact the last resort?
This was the last resort, I think, and you know, the Judicial Appointment Commission, for instance, got voted unanimously. It was a partisan issue, but the government was able to build consensus on that. And if the committee's recommendation is that this is misbehavior, the Parliament could really sit up and think how to safeguard this institution. And there may be a consensus. Why are we discounting it? We are not supposed to vote on party lines. Parties are not expected to issue whips. People will vote according to their conscience. And if it is not, if the committee finds that it is not, the matter will be over.
So, all right, let me take this question then to Kamini Jaiswal. The worry that this will leave a permanent stain on the image of the Supreme Court, Ms. Jaiswal, that among Indian citizens, ordinary Indian citizens, they'll all start to now worry if the Supreme Court, which was up until now, beyond question, will really be able to serve justice. What is your response to that?
I don't know. I'm sorry. My response is that people have already started raising a finger on the Supreme Court, especially when the order was passed in that Hadia matter, when several other orders came to be passed one after the other, people had started raising their fingers. It is not the same Supreme Court that was there 20 years ago. Unfortunately, to save this Supreme Court, to save the institution, you think people were not raising up, people did not see the press conference of the 4 judges? If 4 sitting judges of the Supreme Court have to come out and say something, you think that still people are going to doubt and people are not going to raise a finger? Every person who would have seen this would raise a finger to what's going on in the Supreme Court. Why is this happening? Then there are 2 letters, and then the government also, is quid pro quo going on all the time. So therefore, you don't say that nobody. Now suddenly, because of this impeachment motion, there will be this thing on the Supreme Court, and that people will start raising up. People have already started. The last 6 months have been very, very bad.
Mr. Sundaram?
I'm very sorry to hear such a pessimistic view of the Supreme Court from a very learned friend of mine. Let me tell you that our Supreme Court in the recent past, and at least over the last 20 years or 15 years, as far as I can say, when I've been here, has been really a fantastic court which has done so much. People have had faith in the court for good reason. and the court has never let down the faith. When my learned friend talks about, oh, it's the Supreme Court and I know the old Supreme Court, I can only ask her, you know, there was an old Supreme Court which gave us ADM Jabalpur, which suspended our fundamental rights, which said a person can be thrown into jail without even a trial.
Yes.
Don't forget,
Which
that was
gave
a
us
Supreme
Loya,
Court
and
which
this
was there
also will
before.
go on.
So if you want to find fault with the court, you always can. Let's not do that. Let's not, you know, belittle an institution which has done this country so proud and which still does. And that pessimistic view I find very unfortunate. For whatever reasons you may have, that you may not have liked one judgment or another judgment, please don't belittle a whole institution. And that is my whole fear, that what is being done now is going to result in exactly what you're saying, belittling an institution.
But
I am talking about 4 judges coming out and saying that all is not well. I didn't talk of judgments. Judgments don't make the court. Judgments come and judgments go.
I think that is a very bold thing to have done, which itself would give people faith in the judiciary. That itself would give people faith in the judiciary, that 4 judges could come out and say this. People would have faith in that the judges can be transparent about their court.
But they'll wonder what's going on. Why do 4 judges have to come and say this?
Well, unfortunately, it's the politicians who are telling us what is going on today.
Well, Mr. Sundaram,
By this impeachment motion, they're telling the whole country that this is what we want to do.
Yes, yes. Mr. Tulsi, go ahead, please.
What I want to say is that we are as much proud of the Supreme Court of India as Mr. Sundaram, maybe more. And we've had perhaps even longer association with the Supreme Court, and we spent all our life in the judiciary. We know that this is the temple of justice. And we are, as the pujaris of this temple, we want that people should have greater faith even. This is to strengthen the court. This is not to weaken it. If the inquiry, we'll be happiest if the inquiry finds that there's nothing in it. But according to our limited knowledge, this is a serious matter, serious enough for initiating this proceeding. There will be, you know, some effect on the individual. That is regrettable. But the truth must emerge, and the truth must triumph. Whoever knows truth in an open and fair battle put to verse, well, I'm absolutely certain that the truth will finally emerge.
Well, Mr. Sundaram, answer this question, please, if you would. If you believe that impeachment was not the right route, what was the alternative then? Because, like we said, the judges came out, the 4 judges actually had their press conference, after which Justice Chalmeshwar wrote a letter, after which then this impeachment motion started. Was there a different route? Would you have advised a different route?
Yes, very much so, Faye. If it was that 4 senior judges, and let me say there are 4 senior judges whom we all in this court have the greatest respect for, if they voiced apprehensions about the administration, we would expect that the full court would do something about improving that administration. We would expect that things would be done on that score, and we would hope it would be done. The 4 judges coming out, they were criticized for coming to the media, but according to me, it was very laudable. They came to the media because they were saying that, look, we have nothing to hide. People may feel that the administration is not good. There are things happening in the Supreme Court. We want to be transparent and say, yes, there are problems today, but we have to attend to it. We have to do it, because if we don't safeguard the judiciary, democracy is at an end. They were bold enough to say it, straight enough to say it. And after that, it was for the court, the full court, to deal with it. But I'd hardly say it then becomes a ground for a political party, for whatever reasons it wants to do, to jump on that and say, see, the 4 of them said this, therefore let's impeach and remove the Chief Justice. I don't see that as a ground of impeachment. Nor did those 4 judges say that it was a ground for impeachment or remove the Chief Justice. What they said was, they sounded a warning bell and said, let's deal with the situation. Then it's for the full court to deal with. It's a matter for the judiciary to deal with. It's a full court which has to deal with it. And the full court can deal with it. You don't need impeachment and removal of the Chief Justice in order to deal with it. Is Mr. Tulsi saying that the moment the Chief Justice is removed, then the whole administration will become first class? Is that what he's saying? It still requires all the judges to get together and do something. And that's an in-house matter for the judiciary to do. Let's have faith in the judiciary. Let's not have the answer being a knee-jerk reaction of saying, now, since 4 judges said that, remove the Chief Justice. That is not the answer.
In fact, Mr. Tulsi, let me
Nor
ask
did the
you
4
this
of them ever
question.
say that or insinuate it or indicate it.
Mr. Tulsi, I have one more question for you, if I may please. Charge number 5, according to Mr. Sibal, said that abuse of the exercise of power in choosing to send sensitive matters to particular benches, misusing authority in an attempt to influence the outcome. This would suggest then that there are benches in the Supreme Court that are malleable, that there are other judges on those benches perhaps that aspersions are also being cast on. Do you agree, Mr. Tulsi?
You see, this is mainly based on the charge made in the press conference of the judges. We have no means of knowing, but it is come from an authentic source, and therefore it is one of the charges. But that also is at number 4. The first question is that there was a conspiracy to pay illegal gratification to someone in the judiciary who is by innuendos in the conversation pinpoints towards the Chief Justice, and Chief Justice is the one who's been dealing with this case. He has passed orders earlier which are subject matter of conversation. Then after this conversation, again the same matter and the same arguments. So there is an impression that is created that it is not, the entire talk was not behind the back, but somebody knew about it. Through innuendos, the identity is established, and then the Chief Justice chooses, when the matter is taken up in court 2, that's a convention, that if the Chief Justice is sitting in Constitution bench, mention is made to the senior most next puisne judge. And in court 2, when it is mentioned and the court 2 says that this matter will be heard the same day, then the note is sent, the case is withdrawn, and the Chief Justice chooses to allocate the bench on administrative side. The Chief Justice chooses to hear the matter on judicial side, which is totally wrong. That is what clinches the charge of misbehavior, if that is all true.
Mr. Sundaram?
Now, I'm sure that this high-powered committee...
Look, Faye, I think this whole debating on the merits of each charge is most unfortunate.
Okay.
You know, I said this. I objected to this, to them coming out in public and then start saying this as though they were arguing a brief. You hear one side of a story without giving the other side a chance to even reply to it. And I object to that. I am saying this should never, you know, when there's an impeachment motion like this, it should be left there. People shouldn't come to the media and then argue their whole case before the media. That is what I'm objecting to. The very fact that all of them then went to a press conference and in elaborate detail argued it. That should not be done. Once something like this has moved, then at the most the statement could have been made, we have moved an impeachment motion on certain charges. That's the end. Otherwise, what is being done? Now, if I'm going to be debating this, what are we doing? We're arguing a case?
Right. Kamini
that is exactly what should not be done. And I believe today, by going on commenting on the cases many times, as I've heard in this very show, you're hearing one side of a story without hearing anything else, because the persons concerned can't come out here and give their version. And that is what should be avoided and should not be permitted.
Kamini Jaiswal, please.
Yeah. No, I agree. Nobody is here wanting, but if questions are raised, answers will be given. When you say what was the charge, there is no charge, this is all frivolous, it is political, it is because judgments are given. So obviously some facts will have to be placed to rebut that statement. That is exactly what is being done.
And Kamini ji,
You say this is political because some judgments were coming. Yeah.
Yes, and finally, it's important to place this on the
madam,
table for our viewers.
It was very political, as was very clear
Yes.
from the press conference today.
Yes, and while Kamini ji responds to that, it's also important to place it before our audience that this is not, impeachment is not illegal, it's part of the process, it's mentioned in the Constitution, it's available as a remedy to Parliament.
It's a part of a political process. But I expect that once three judges committee, where there is a Supreme Court judge, there is a Chief Justice of the High Court, and there is a jurist, when they go into all the charges with evidence, and once they find that the charges are proved, they submit a report, then the report is placed before the Parliament, then people have to vote as per their conscience. If they do not find any substance in the charge, the report will say that it is not proved. But in case it is proved, they should, we expect the parliamentarians to vote as per their conscience. Then how can we decide from today that there is an impeachment motion, they don't have a majority, so it will never pass through? So obviously, who's making it political?
Right, so here's the question that one of our viewers has asked us. Harjot Singh has asked us this question. This is important for any of the three of you who want to answer it. He says, impeachment proceedings have been brought against the Chief Justice. Why is the BJP and the Congress getting involved? What is their connection? What are these political parties? What do they have to do with any of it, for or against? Because we know very clearly that neither the Supreme Court nor the Chief Justice belong to either one party. So why has it become, like everything else in our country, a BJP versus Congress conversation? Does anyone want to answer this question?
That is exactly the question, yes. Why are they putting it up? If they are politicizing it,
and that is exactly the point, Faye.
It should really
it started
not
as
be
a
on the
BJP
basis of
versus
party
Congress
lines.
situation. That's my point.
Right, because this is our finance minister, Mr. Jaitley, who put out a statement saying the Congress and its friends have decided to do this. This is popping up on your screen. Congress and friends are using impeachment as a political tool.
I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, Ms. Jaiswal.
They are calling it what? A raga motion. What do you mean by raga motion? Who says raga motion? Somebody said raga motion. Now, what is this nonsense? It is an impeachment motion based on certain issues that are to be placed before a committee, and if there is some substance in it, report will come, and then all the country expects the parliamentarians to do their duty and vote as per their conscience for removal of a judge if he is found guilty of misconduct.
Well, I also want to take this last question to Mr. Tulsi because I've run out of time, Mr. Tulsi. This is where we are right now. We had a no-confidence motion in Parliament that never got taken up because the ruckus in Parliament never stopped. An entire session of Parliament went by without a single job being done except for some very dodgy amendments to the finance bill that got passed without any discussion. Quite frankly, as a citizen of this country, this session of Parliament was the most disappointing I have seen in my adult life. And now we have this. Is democracy in general in question, right?
It happened before also.
Yes. Mr. Tulsi.
For 3 years, the BJP did not let either of the houses function. For 3 years. And in this case, when the finance bill was to be voted, in the midst of ruckus, in the midst of slogans, in the midst of people, by dozens who were in the well of the House, the motions were voted. At that time, no rule was invoked that House has to be in order, only then this motion will be moved. But when no confidence motion comes, this rule is picked up and the motion is not even admitted, which is the simplest thing which was to be done.
Yes.
Because the House is not in order. So therefore, no action can be taken. God knows, we will we think that we have done our duty. The rest is on
Right.
other constitutional functionaries.
Right.
And we are quite hopeful that they will also do their duty, whatever they think, and eventually the truth must triumph.
All right, we have to leave this conversation here. I want to thank all three of you for being patient and for sharing your views on this channel with my viewers. I'm sure my viewers appreciate it as well. Viewers, if you've just tuned in, what this basically means is that there is a motion right now to remove the Chief Justice of India from his position. The Chief Justice of India is the highest office in the judiciary of our country. And this is how it will proceed. This motion will now be placed before the Vice President, who is the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. He will examine it, perhaps also seek legal counsel, decide if he wants to accept the motion. If he accepts the motion will then need a committee of 3 to be appointed, a Supreme Court judge, a High Court judge and an eminent jurist. These 3 people, this committee will then examine the charges that have been made against the Chief Justice. They will then place a report before both Houses of Parliament. Both Houses of Parliament will then vote. If 2/3 majority is achieved in both Houses of Parliament, then the motion carries forward and Mr. Deepak Mishra, Honourable Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India, will be removed from his position. But in the meantime, it's important to remember that only the first step has been taken, which is the necessary signatures of a minimum of 50 members of Parliament have been placed on this motion, and it's been placed before the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. It's also important to notice that our Supreme Court is not a political house. It doesn't belong to any one political party, and it's meant to be independent. It is meant, in fact, as a judiciary to actually look out for us, to look after our rights when all government has failed. So, let's actually separate this conversation from anything political that might be offered to us at this point and only look at it at the merits of it. We hope that the process will be carried forward cautiously and without politics. And we'll bring you a closer look at it as it moves forward. Thanks for watching. Mr. Soli Sarabji, very, very eminent counsel joining us to give us his opinion. Mr. Sarabji, I can't tell you how grateful we are to have your time and your wisdom shared with us. I want to first understand, from your point of view, do you believe this was a last resort, or do you believe this was political? Because we're now getting different views on this entire impeachment motion.
You see, the whole idea to ensure the independence of the judiciary, to make sure that they have a security of tenure. So Chief Justice or judge cannot be removed because of the executive's fancy in doing so. At the same time, the Chief Justice is not above the law. He can be impeached, but impeached on what ground? For serious misbehavior. Now, serious misbehavior you cannot conclude from the fact that you think certain order of his is wrong, is not correct. It rather goes beyond the normal function of the judiciary. If you do that, and if you start impeaching the Chief Justice on grounds like this, then, my God, the very independence of the judiciary will be at stake. And if that happens, democracy will be under siege in our country. Now, I'm very sorry that even people who should know better have just signed the impeachment motion as if it's like removing a mablata from an office. You are dealing with the exalted office of the Chief Justice. Please remember, of course impeach him, he's not above the law, but there should be solid, substantial, cogent grounds for doing so. And I'm afraid, from what I heard in the morning from Kapil Sibal, the grounds he mentioned in the letter, in the petition which he gave to the Vice Chairman, Vice President for impeachment, none of those grounds are really making out a ground for impeachment. I mean, you may not agree with the order, so ought to impeach him. What happens then? This